Dee, thanks so much for joining. In 2002, I embarked on a 75-day RV tour across the US, dubbed the ZayZoon Payday Are We There Yet RV tour. It was an opportunity to connect with the people that use ZayZoon every day. We hosted appreciation events, talks with clients, customers, and just ultimately like connected with the mission. 41 ZayZooners joined for various parts of this trip. And um, we had a freshly wrapped ZayZoon RV, but before we actually kicked anything off, Tanner and myself visited Dee at his LA studio to sit down with Group Chat, a podcast that Dee helped create and that he hosts every single week, multiple times a week. And so I think, Dee brings a super unique perspective to the podcasting world, and just the world in general. Like being in the fashion industry since 2002, he co-founded the 5-4 group, which has a handful of clothing brands underneath it, like the Young and Reckless and New Republic. He also co-founded Ghost, and we'll get into that today. It's a B2B marketplace for excess inventory in the fashion industry. They raised a fresh 30 million, I believe, in your Series B. So yeah, let's hop into it. Um, Man, this conversation can go so many places. I actually want to dive into the consistency. Like you are consistent as hell. 2 podcasts a week. It used to be 3. Talk to me about that process. Like, talk to me about um, how do you stay consistent? What gets you up in the morning? And just like let's dig in there. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that come from it.
Yeah, I think it really stems from like this idea of discipline to get the results that you want. When I started my first business in 2002, which is the 5-4 brand, I used to go to work, which was in downtown LA, and I lived at that time in the Valley with my parents. I just graduated college, and I used to work out of my mom's office, and I would go to work at 8 a.m. every day. Keep in mind, I had no customers, I had nothing. But I just knew that if I showed up every single day, good things would happen. Like you got to prepare yourself for the chance you get an opportunity. And so I'm a big believer that if you are going in the right direction and you're putting forth the effort, you'll get a chance to win the game. You will put yourself in the chance to win. So like discipline is everything in my life. When it comes to going to work, like I am to this day, I feel gross if I show up past 9 a.m. Like I panic, right? And I have 100 plus employees and and if I'm not first or second in the office, I panic. It's just something that's just from my childhood. My parents are like that. And it's just something that I have in my head that like, we have a operating principle at Ghost. If you're not first, you're last. And that's if you watch Talladega Nights, it's from that movie. And I think that's really true in everything we do. Is like it's all about discipline.
What do you think helped instill that? Like you said, your parents are all about that. What about the childhood maybe brought that discipline to play?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely just watching your parents, right? Like my father was up at 5 a.m. every day, go to work, and drive the downtown every single day for his engineering job. And so I firsthand witnessed discipline. My parents never let me sleep in. 7 a.m. on the weekends, they would open my door and just start talking loudly on the phone to their cousins in India. And so even to this day, I cannot sleep in. I wake up incredibly early every single morning and I start my day. And so I've just now decided that like anything I want in life requires discipline. And consistency is the word that you used, which is very much like if I commit to something, I got to do it. I'd rather just not commit to things. So like the main thing I do is actually not commit to anything because I don't want to be committed because I know I cannot just go all the way and do it.
What so maybe for those that aren't familiar, like you run a podcast and you were doing 3 episodes a week. Now you do 2 episodes a week. Um, like like just coming up with content for that stuff. And I get, it's you chatting with a couple of your friends, but no, like there's some value that's coming out of that. There's a lot of value that's coming out of that, and there's for the listener, and there's like good conversation topics being had. Like, how are you? Um, what's your creative process look like for that? How are you actually staying on topic for that many times a week, and making sure that you're digging in deep to those things?
It really comes down to, because of the consistency and discipline, it's become really easy. Like, I read the articles 5 minutes before we record, and I just start talking. And I think that's because I've done it 1,000 times. And so it really comes down to the consistency and discipline at the end of the day to get really, really good at anything. And if you look at, like, if you're interested in sports or finance or business or tech, like, the most successful people in every industry are highly disciplined people, because the more you do something, the easier it becomes. And so it was funny, we were doing kind of like performance reviews with our team in New York, and our chief of staff, she was like, I think the podcast really helps you with your communicating style. And I'm like, it completely has. Like, when I pitch an investor, like, the storytelling that I do, like, I know I'm going to knock it out of the park with the story. Whether they are believing that story, that's another kind of, you know, topic for another conversation. But, like, how I will present what we are doing will get them excited. And I'm very confident that it will get them excited, because even pitching my own business, the amount of practice I had, whether internally or externally, has only gotten me better and better and better. And it's like A/B testing, even with content, is like you get feedback right away. You put out a podcast, you do a pitch, you talk to a customer. If you don't get a positive response or a weird facial emotion, then, like, you didn't connect. Like, in a sales meeting for me, I'm changing my pitch based on the facial expressions of the person I'm speaking with. If I'm not resonating with them, I'm going in a different direction. So it's like live A/B testing and what will connect with whoever I'm speaking to, whether that's a podcast, whether that's my wife, whether that's my kids, whether that's a customer. It's always like live A/B testing.
What the podcast has a big viewership now. You're reading an article maybe 5 minutes before the pod starts, and sort of just riffing on it with your two co-founders. How does like imposter syndrome not get in your head? How are like are you concerned that you're going to be talking stuff that just like completely is missing the mark? Um, how do you sort of wrap your head around having confidence in talking about something that you only have 5 minutes of knowledge in?
You know, I used to be worried about that, and then I realized no one knows what the fuck they're talking about. So why can't it be me too? Like, like, if you watch CNBC, or Bloomberg, these people are interviewing titans of industry and asking the dumbest questions. Like, they don't understand their businesses. I would say, as a serial entrepreneur, deep kind of connections and relationships in a variety of industries, I'm having pretty in-depth conversations on a variety of topics daily that makes me feel very confident that, like, what I and I'm not saying you have to agree with me. I'm just saying this is my opinion of the situation based on the facts I've been given. And so, could it be incorrect? Of course, I can, but I'm also allowed to interpret things how I believe they seem fit, right? Like, communication is very much like how you make people feel. So if you communicated information that said your company is successful and I don't think it is, then I'm happy to speak out against it if it feels like there's holes in that argument. And so, and then I also have very deep convictions on certain things. And so, no matter what, I won't change my opinion on it.
What are some of those things that you have super deep convictions on?
Um, all politicians are full of shit. No one has any good thing nothing is from a good place. Everything is from a place of power. I think in particular industries or businesses that are emerging, There's so much. Let's take technology, for example. I've been in apparel my whole life, my adult life. I got into technology in the last two years, and we've been very successful very quickly. I was shocked to find, and this is, I always believed this, but this is where like the imposter syndrome was, but I just refused to believe otherwise. I always believed most technology companies were full of shit, that most of the things they talk about are not truly automated. And everyone would tell me otherwise, that no, I have 500 engineers, we figured everything out, blah, 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 blah. I built a technology company and I was honest with my investors. I'm like, this is going to take years to automate. This ain't happening overnight. We have the revenue, but it is being done manually. And over time, more and more of this process will be automated. And they were obviously like, yeah, of course, that's how things work. And then I get in the room now with these founders that everyone says are, revolutionize an industry. And I'm like, they have a guy on a hamster wheel in the back. And I'm like, what? This is like an AI software company with a hamster wheel? And so I'm always shocked to see, specifically in technology, how much of it is truly automated and how much of it's still very manual. And so there's a lot of opportunity to interpret that as like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or like, yes, I do know what I'm doing. It just takes time. Can like what like a great example of this is Facebook ad marketplace. Today it's a self-serving marketplace. If you placed an ad the year they launched advertising on Facebook, you had to call an ad rep, tell them your budget, tell them the demographic you were targeting, and then they would create the ad for you. And then a month later, they would tell you their performance in email. But it took time to build what they have now, which is like truly a self-service, truly revolutionary targeting platform for advertising. But it didn't happen the first day it launched.
Yeah, it's I was actually saying this the other day, and I don't know if it's like a factor of you know, we've graduated into a stage of company where we're like part of the cool kids now, or if it's just because like the tech industry went to shit and when the tide was out, no one could really hide themselves from being naked. But it's similar thoughts. Like I'm in the room with like all these entrepreneurs or founders that I looked up to, um, and we're having like these conversations down. I'm like, oh wait, like you guys don't have this stuff figured out either, and like you're doing all of this like you said, like manually or whatever else. It's funny how that is. Yeah, so we had another guest on maybe a couple months ago that did the exact opposite of you. So Rob Go went from tech into apparel. And so I'm wondering, like, for you, like, what were some of those, manual versus automation is one of them, but like, what was some of those other misconceptions or maybe crazy challenges? Let's talk about like the first maybe 0 to 6 months or so, like that true like initial 0 to 1 phase where you got into the tech industry and you're like, holy shit, this is so much different from apparel.
Um, First fun fact, I told Rob Go not to go into apparel, and he didn't listen to me. And to this day, he tells everyone, "Damn, I should have listened to D." I literally saw him at the Super Bowl this weekend. He was telling a mutual friend of ours, he's like, "D was the only one that shot it to me straight." So I think when it comes to technology, the first big misconception was, or the first challenge was really around fundraising. Um, I was I had viewed fundraising as something that was incredibly difficult. And I think it is generally incredibly difficult. But if you have experience in the case that I did, you have a compelling story, people want to back people like that. And so I had pretty low confidence going into raising my seed round because I was like, why would anyone give me money to do a technology company? I don't know anything about tech. My co-founder did, but I had zero experience. And so what I found, which I was pleasantly surprised, that they valued my understanding of the industry way more than if I was a technologist or not. And that was a big like shift for me. That gave me a lot of confidence because I did not have confidence launching this business. And then fast forward as time went on in the first 6, 12 months of the business, I felt very comfortable because when I started speaking to more technology founders, it's that realization that like, oh, no one has it figured out. I mean, think about it like from this perspective, Shopify to this day still doesn't make money. And they're kind of top of class in terms of software companies in the world. And so it takes time. It's the real answer in technology to build these incredible businesses. And so the 0 to 1, you have to be very patient and you have to like find what is your alpha that will get you basically customers, what will get you your next round of financing, what will buy you more time to continue building out your vision, your dream. And for me, what I realized was getting customers and revenue was actually the easiest thing for us to do. So I was like, I'm going to focus on that while we keep learning how to build the technology that will kind of build this business. And that'll just take time. And the people who back this business will just have to be comfortable with that. If they're not a good fit for what we're doing.
How much do you think the like clout of group chat and uh, your other businesses sort of helped you in that fundraising momentum? I would assume a lot. Um,
I think in the
but
seed round, a lot, like a
yeah,
lot, a lot. I think because I'd been the average age of a venture backed founder is 43 years old. And I started this business when I was 42, 41, 41. And when I looked that up, because I felt like I was old. Yeah, 41. I was like, fuck, that's so old. And
and now you're a couple years into a startup, and you're like, now I feel really old.
yeah, I'm actually re-energized. I feel very young right now. But but uh, but I think the big takeaway was that the experience I've had, and I had a fairly large business. We were doing $90 million at our peak, so it's like I had 150 employees. Like I had a business that like almost had an exit for $250 million. So it's like I was there. I was almost at the end of that journey. So I think that's actually an incredible characteristic to have in a founder, a bitter one, because you haven't seen the end goal. And so I think um, people saw that they could see it in my eyes that I wanted it still, and I had the experience and the know-how and the relationship. So I think the cloud of just like being a thought leader and an expert in my particular industry helped in the seed round a lot.
What you gave a really good nugget there with the 5-4 group, um, and sort of a deal that fell apart. To the extent that you can, like I want to dig into that a little bit. What the heck happened, and like how does a deal falling apart in the 11th hour occur, and like what are the feelings that go through you in that? Like let's just start peeling that apart a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's devastating because it was something, we started this business when we were 21 years old, and at 35, 36, business is on absolute fire. We hired JP Morgan, we go to market, we have 5 term sheets, and then one comes in at $250 million, much higher than we expected. I think the highest we were expecting was 150. The Carlyle Group. I mean, I hate all these people, so I don't care about them anymore. The Carlyle Group came in at 250, life-changing money for me and my partner. Um, Term sheet signed, diligence done, and on the last week of it, I'm at my friend's restaurant, get a phone call. It's like midnight. They're based in DC and New York. I keep getting missed calls, so I pick up finally. And they're like, yeah, man, it's not going to happen. I was like, what? What do you mean it's not going to happen? And they're like, yeah, we're a consensus board. and we don't have consensus. Like we need unanimous across, and we have one person withholding because of a previous bad kind of experience in a catalog business in the 80s, which has nothing to do with what we do, but that was his, you know, thing. And so I go to New York, try to salvage it, not possible. Now word leaks, other funds are repricing us, and basically we decide to, not do any transaction. We didn't need the money, so we just kind of went back, and that basically started the decline of the business because we just kind of, it was like a gut punch. Um, so yeah, I mean, it sucked.
Why what was the initial, like what was the catalyst to sell in the first place? Was it just kind of like, hey, we've been on a tear for, a few years now. We've been at this for, almost a decade now. Like it just seems like the right thing to do. Like you just said, like you didn't necessarily need the money. The business is probably cash flowing all right. It's doing okay. Like what was the thought around an exit in the first place? And then, um,
Yeah, I mean, I think,
yeah,
I would say if I were to look back at my career, I should have been monetizing the entire time. Like every time I had a hot brand, I should have just sold it or done a transaction. Like you have to like collect your chips along the way. It's very hard to make money, lots of money. And so when you get an opportunity to do that, you kind of have to like, and you could see the trajectory of your business when you kind of start becoming getting a knack for it, like when to do these things. And unfortunately, like maybe we had timed it, we had waited too late, where the scale of the business was too big, where people didn't feel like it could continue on that path. And maybe if we had done it 2 years earlier, it would have been easier. Um, so it's really about like getting liquidity. I mean, getting cash. Like that's really what drove it. I was getting married and I was like, I need money. As a founder, you don't make any money. I was making doing $90 million, but dead broke. So it, just because we were doing all that business didn't mean I had any money. And so I was a believer of like, okay, it's time to get some cash.
what the brands, I know nothing really about 5-4, like aside from the brands that you hosted. Like are you creating and incubating those brands in house? Are you buying them when they're sort of like in their infancy? Like how did
Yeah.
that all work?
Yeah, we created all of them in-house. 5-4, Young and Reckless, New Republic, host of other brands. We created them all ourselves. We became incredibly good at manufacturing, incredibly good at design. So we had all the skill sets to just spin up brands really easily. So whenever we needed a brand for something, we would create it. It was something that was like innate in us the day we started the business.
That's really cool. I feel like I could go down a rabbit hole there. Maybe I'll come back to that. I want to cover some ghost stuff as well. So okay, so transaction fails. You're kind of like shit, punching the gut. Um, Business is declining, but I mean it's still a thing. Um, what's the timeline between that and Ghost, and what led you to ultimately make Ghost? And then I think maybe just for context for everyone listening, what exactly is Ghost?
So Ghost is a private business to business marketplace for surplus inventory from apparel brands, footwear, beauty, home goods, toys, small home appliances. We basically connect sellers and buyers of inventory all over the world.
And how did you go from 5-4 into that? Or like what was the, yeah, what was the shift ultimately that took you from fashion to tech?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I'd been doing the previous business for 21 years at the time. Kind of felt like I actually ended up having another failed transaction for an exit. And so at that point, I was
With 5-4 as well?
yeah, in
Oh
21.
man.
So then at that point, coming out of COVID, I was like, all right, life's too short. I gave this thing, I mean, at that point, half my life and didn't get the result I wanted. It's time to move on. So I basically decided to um, check out what opportunities would be available to me. I looked at everything from getting a job to starting something again in fashion to potentially starting something in technology. And this is how powerful this podcast is that I started. I was in New York for Fashion Week after the kind of failed transaction happened, because it was a conversation in New York. And a group chat listener, which we call Kathy's, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I saw that you're in New York this week. I'd love to meet up." And I was like, "I just landed. I have an hour to kill. I'm at my hotel." And he goes, "Where are you staying?" I say, "Love and Howard in Soho." He's like, "Oh, I live around the corner. I'll come." I'm like, "Great. I have 1 hour." This guy shows up. We've talked on DM. I don't know. So I'm like, "Oh, what's your deal?" He's a serial tech entrepreneur, has sold 3 businesses, is very successful. He's been listening to the pod since we started. And he's like, "What brings you to New York?" And I go, I don't know why I said it, but I said, "I'm starting something new." And he goes, "Really? How can I help you?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Who are you meeting for fundraising?" And I was like, um, and I knew we had a mutual friend, this guy named Nahal at ENIAC. And he's like, "I'm meeting, I think I'm going to go on a run with Nahal on Friday." And this was Tuesday. And he goes, "Okay, cool. Who else are you meeting with?" And I just didn't have anyone. I wasn't meeting anyone. While I'm sitting there with him, Nahal from ENIAC, who's a good friend of mine, which is a early stage venture fund in New York City, he texts me and he goes, "You're in town raising money and you didn't call me?" He's like, "We're meeting tomorrow for breakfast." And ask this guy, Kevin, I'm like, "Did you text Nahal?" He's like, "I texted like 10 people just now." And because of his text, and a tweet he said where he posted something to the effect of 20-year-old industry founder in apparel building something in retail tech who wants an intro. 10 funds hit him up for an intro. All of a sudden, I'm pitching. I didn't have a name, didn't have an idea, didn't have a deck. And that's basically, I called Josh, who's my co-founder now, but used to work for me. He ran one of our brands. He was the CEO of New Republic. And I go, "Josh, I think I can get something done here. What do you want to do?" And he's like, "If you're doing something new, I'm joining you." I'm like, "Great. I need a name, a deck, an idea. We need to figure this out fast." And so I take the first meeting and I just said to the Nihal, and I was like, "The idea is around the excess inventory space. We're formulating it now." He goes, "I'm in. I'm done." He goes, "How much are you raising?" I go, 5 million. Just made that up. He goes, "We're in for 2. You got to get the rest on your own." I'm like, "Done." He's like, "Go meet all my co-founders today of the fund. Meet them all that day. They all give the blessing." And we then get bombarded with interest because we already have a term sheet. And you know how VCs are, they're followers. Um, so they turn around and I end up getting an introduction to another fund called Equal Ventures out of New York. And they actually had a thesis in the excess inventory space. And they were looking for a founder or a pair of founders that had deep retail experience that could solve this problem. They weren't concerned about the tech. They were literally just like, this can only be solved by an insider. And I was like, "Holy shit, what a perfect investor." And so they ended up leading around, the two of them. And basically, 3 months into the business, we were like, we kind of know what we want to build now. It's going to be a B2B marketplace. And we hadn't even incorporated when we had gotten the term sheets. They're like, "So what's the name of the company?" And I was like, "Well, we haven't done anything yet. So let me get back to you." And that was November of 21. December of 21, we decided to do Ghost and call it a B2B marketplace. January, we did our first transaction, which was basically a wholesaler in the LA industry that had excess t-shirts. And I literally picked up the phone, called Burlington Coat Factory, which is a discount retailer. And I said, "Hey, Burlington, on a B2B marketplace, excess inventory. They're like, we don't know what that means. Bye. Called them back a week later and said, hey, and I know this buyer. I go, hey, Alyssa, I have some t-shirts from this brand at this price. Are you interested? She goes, yes. So she placed an order. I made her write the purchase order out to Ghost, made her set it up to Ghost. So now Ghost was a vendor, which I knew how valuable that was for us. So then I was like, screw it. I'm not going to even tell anyone what we're building yet. I'm just going to go tell people we're just selling them inventory. So I called up every retailer, TJ Maxx, Winners, you name it, every retailer you can ever imagine that buys this stuff and just started saying, hey, I have shoes, I have t-shirts, I have this brand, that brand. And then after we started doing like millions of dollars of business, I told them, look, we're not a wholesaler. This is what we're building. And they were like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And then we, subsequently, which was 6 months later, raised our Series A.
Super swivel chair. I love it. We had something similar in the early days of ZayZoon where like so our business is someone needs an advance before their next
Yep.
payday, and we partner with their employer and allow them to take that. And yeah, like in the early days, it was someone would take a payout from us, and we'd log into our online banking, and we'd enter in the amount and send it to them, and then we'd swivel chair back and message the person and say, "Hey, your money's on its way. Like, thanks for being a customer." And like total swivel chair, and then
Yeah.
the tech comes later, right?
Yeah. I
Um,
think you have to prove that there's a market for what you're doing. And that's what I didn't appreciate pre being in technology. Like I talked to the founder of Hotel Tonight, and he's telling me every morning he should just call every hotel and be like, "How many rooms you got? What price do you want? Okay, cool. Put it up on a website, and now you bid." Or how Airbnb launched, which is just scraping Craigslist. They didn't actually have any listings. They were selling a Craigslist listing. So
yeah,
you have to
yeah.
like to hack it till you know actually have
No,
a
no,
thing.
for sure. Yeah, it's funny. Like I think like people that aren't in tech have this sort of like there's this elusive thought around it of tech is the thing, but really like tech just enables the thing to be better, faster, stronger. Like you need to make the business work by phone calls and driving across town. Um, where,
Absolutely.
where'd the name Ghost come from?
Basically, in this industry, we're working with a lot of the best brands, best retailers in the world. It's extremely sensitive who we work with because these are publicly traded companies in some cases. And so the idea here is that we are a ghost. You don't need to know who we are. The consumer definitely does not need to know who we are. We barely want anyone in the industry to know who we are. We're here in the background solving problems, the most important problems for our customers. And that's kind of our idea is like really be behind the brands, behind the retailers, and a solution that like they can trust. Because transparency in this industry is very minimal and trust is very, very low. So like the fact that you can come to us and trust and get the transparent answers, it may not be what you want to hear, but we will tell it to you. And that's extremely different than how other people operate in this industry.
Um, Fun fact, kind of related. Um, so my first like real tech job was in Hong Kong, and it was working for a company called Private Sales.hk,
Yeah.
and similar kind of but different. My job was effectively calling up like high-end retailers, Bottega Veneta, like all these high-end retailers, and then getting their surplus, and then we'd had exclusive ability to sell it on private sales.hk, which ultimately went nowhere, but it was a really interesting dive into the fashion industry. Um, Thought I'd toss that out there.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's funny.
so talking about like the Kathy, the group chat listener that you met up with in New York, talking about like building community. So I know like you're super. I mean, man, like the way we got connected was a DM, right? It was a DM that you answered. Like, talk to me about the importance of building community, how you find time to build community, um, and I guess what that looks like. now that you have multiple personas, like you are Dee the podcast host, but you're also Dee the the Series B startup founder.
Yeah, I mean, I think community is extremely important for me personally, not just professionally. Um, when you think about all the things in life that you will come across, whether it's professional, family, personal, you always need help. And a lot of people don't put forth the time or the effort to actually build community, build friendships. And I was a big believer of that from like my first day in college. It didn't happen in high school. First day of college, where I was like, I'm here, fuck it. I want to meet everybody. I want to meet people inside this school, outside this school, whoever I can meet. I came to this school to meet people. I'm gonna meet people. And as
What
time
what
went
what
on,
what what'd you go to college for?
I was in an entrepreneurship program at USC.
Hell yeah, cool.
And I basically put it on myself that I knew if I could meet people and people would like me, that good things will come. And I think there's such an art to getting to know people and building connection and relationship and friendship. And you have to be extremely self aware, which I was fortunately at a young age, where I would start building relationships with no purpose at a very young age, which in some cases are paying off today. And so, but no, but most people don't have that in them. They meet someone. I use this when I talk to the young people in our office. It's like all of you guys want to fuck after the first 5 minutes of talking to someone. That's not how the world works. That's not how life works. You actually have to put forth in building a relationship with people and have no selfish, you know, plan on it. Just meet people, talk to people, build those relationships. So I think like a big part of it is like I do it because I know it's important that you give back and you pay it forward. And selfishly, it's helped me in a lot of ways, and I enjoy it. I love meeting new people, and I like meeting people in different situations. Like that's why I have a run club I've been doing for 6 years because I love running and I like people who run. People who run have a different personality than people that don't run, and I get along with runners more. So it's just like it's just things like that that like I also if you want certain types of friendships in your life or certain type of people, you got to go get it. No one's going to do it for you.
Do you find yourself having um I guess yeah, you find yourself having a lot of different types of friendships. Like I know for myself, there's that like founder part of me that is really difficult to relate to, or at least I feel it's very difficult to relate to other people. And so there's like that tight group of founder friends, but then of course you have friends for running or whatever else. Is that something that you experience, and how have you sort of I guess like do you find the same friends that you had in the apparel industry have persisted through to the startup industry, or do you think that it's changed because of the problems that you're solving?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very social and friendly, so I've always had a wide variety of friends. Um, so I think like, and that's by design. Like I also don't, when I hang out socially, I don't want to talk about work. I want to talk about football, tequila. Like I want to be an idiot. Like that's what I want to do. Like I'm not one of those people. If we went out to dinner, we're talking about work for 3 hours. Like this is not me. If I wanted to do that, I'd rather just stay at work and just do work. Like I'm, and I so and the other challenge is, as I'm sure you know, as the founder, it's pretty lonely. You can't tell anyone the truth, like how you're feeling, because then people will panic if they know how you're actually feeling. And so it's quite lonely. Luckily, I have a co-founder, so that helps. That's a person you could be 100% transparent with, and so that helps. There are few founder friends that I feel comfortable sharing stuff with, but in general, like as you know, like And people want their founders to be superheroes. And so it's really hard to be transparent with people.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I get that. With the relationship stuff, like playing the long game there, I think you've embraced that like internship culture, at least from the little bit that I know. I think you've embraced that internship culture like super well. I know just like with group chat and stuff, I've talked to a few different, assistants or interns that you have engineering in the shop there. Um, what's sort of what's sort of your play there as far as do they come in, or are they paid? Are they unpaid? Are you like, how are you laying out that career trajectory for them? What's the points of importance that you're telling them? Um, yeah.
Yeah. So I think for us, in my previous job, my previous company, internships wasn't a popular thing, mainly because it always felt like a burden to the company more than an opportunity. In this particular company, I'm very big on internships because I want to build the pipeline of the future. Uh,
Does it still feel like a burden, or do you think that there's something that you're doing differently that allows you to match their skills a lot quicker and kind of because I think like maybe for like people listening, what doesn't get realized is people like, oh, an intern, like cheap or free, like why wouldn't you say yes, and you should be taking all of them? And in actuality, it's like because you need to train them, and it
yeah,
actually takes away time from your expensive resources, and it's slow. And so maybe like I'm just curious, is
yeah,
this company different in that sense?
yeah. The only reason why it's different is that we we are looking for very particular talent, specifically in Los Angeles. So in order to build the reputation locally as the best company to work in, that you have to put effort and investment into building these people up. So is it still a burden? Yes, 100%. But it's a necessary investment in the future of this business because as we know, like people make businesses and the culture that we're building here, we we might find it easier to find young people, train them the way that we need them than finding someone that works somewhere else at 10 years. Like, for example, we're 100% in office. And if I hire someone that's remote and tell them to come in office, that might be a culture clash. And so there's some like harsh realities of that type of stuff in today's kind of work environment that you have to face. So like I'm very particular on like work style and the culture I want to build. And I think the internship program creates that. Like, if you were into after college, during college, if you got banking at Goldman Sachs, you were top of your fucking class. And everybody knows it. Like those are the best kids at every school worked at Goldman Sachs. And so like when I think about what I want to build for us, it's like, oh my God, I got the ghost internship. There's 5 slots. I'm one of them. So that's basically what like I want to build for us. Because that does create like the better pipeline, the best kids that want to come work for you.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe this is just like an outsider looking in, but being in the fashion industry, even if you're, the ghost behind the scenes, like there is like that cool factor required, or that exclusivity required in fashion regardless, right? So I think that just like adds to that. Okay, so culture then, like you want to create the culture that you want to create. Like you're having people in office.
Yeah.
You got like one of your mantras is, if you ain't first, you're last, I think you said. What are some other cultural things that you um, what are some of your core values, I suppose, or other things you strive for? And then like any um, tactical steps that you take to really dig into that culture and try to create what
Yeah.
you want.
I laminated and put it on every single person at this company's desk, operating principles. So I'll read them for you really quick. Just a high level. If
Please.
we're not first, we're last. Embrace radical candor. Anything we can do tomorrow, we can do today. Obsess over the customer, solutions, not problems. And so that's basically the prototypical. If you don't believe these things, you shouldn't work here.
And how do you like continually reinforce that, or taking like the anything that we can do tomorrow we can do today, for example. How are you weighing that like tactically in a meeting where there's prioritization in place, or when everyone's like suffering from fucking just exhaustion of having a crazy long work day? Like, what are some of the rituals that you put in place to actually make sure those values are lived?
Yeah, so I would say we're in the early innings of that.
Yeah.
And the key piece to it is I think there are clear OKRs for the entire company. And so if you're not building towards those every single day in your actions, then it's pretty obvious in your decision making. Like we have very clear things that we're solving for. So when you make a decision that's against that, then it's clear that you're missing the mark, because it's not just about sales, 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 sales at all cost. We have very clear guidelines of how we want to grow this company. And so it's very tactical in the sense that the OKRs are very clear. If you follow the OKRs, live by these principles, your daily job should actually be quite easier. That because it's clear what we're asking you to focus on and what we're not asking you to focus on. And so that's the hope. But how you enforce those things really comes down to like hiring the right people that at the stage we're at, they have to self-correct. And so the one thing that we have done is one of our investors in the last round was the founder of Revolut, the neobank out of Europe. And they're known for like a cutthroat performance culture. They do performance reviews quarterly. And if you get a PIP, they give you your severance at that moment. It's over. And so they're very aggressive in the way they've operated. And that's worked for them. But there's a lot, and I think that's probably not us, but I think we're leaning more that way than the other way. And I think performance reviews have been like an incredible unlock for us. And in giving people clear feedback on specifically how they can make an impact at this company and how what they're doing today is or is not doing that.
Is that something that you get coached on? Is that something that your, advisors or even formal board members are helping you with? Like, how are you taking those tools to like graduate into a Series B company? We're at the same stage, right? Like we're
Yeah.
115 employees, um, Series B, like trying to get a lot of these processes into place. Just curious.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it was honestly the Revolut team. They basically have like a handbook on this. We went and visited them in London, and I walked out of there and I was like, "Fuck, this place is great. Like this is the company I want to run." And it got us very inspired to apply these things. So it was truly from just hearing about a company that we looked up to, and we were like, we just straight out asked them, "How do we do this at our company?" And then they gave us like a handbook of like, this is how we do performance reviews. And they're actually going to roll out performance review software because so many people have asked them on how to do it at scale. Um, so I can share that with you as it comes online. But I think it's like to your point, you just for companies you admire, you just go straight to them and be like, I want this to happen at my company. How do I do it?
Yeah, and then so you're like, okay, you want that to happen at your company, you bring it back. Um, like my experience has been, you get this idea, or you see like you get inspired, you want to bring the Revolut operating principles inside, and then it's the next 6 months or 12 months of like actually trying to integrate them in and refine them and make sure that they're working and kind of match them to your own culture as well. Like, am I crazy, or is that the same thing that you experience?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes time, but I think the thing that I've learned in running this business is I try to get buy-in from as many people early on, like all leadership, before I go and like I try to not make it like this is mine and Josh's idea. You guys all we kind of sell it to everyone and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Are we all aligned here? And as long as everyone's aligned, then it's easier for it to like permeate throughout the company. If there's pushback, then it's really hard.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, cool, man. I got maybe a last maybe a last question, a really easy question. I think it's an easy question. I want some fashion predictions. What are we feeling? What's some fashion predictions for this year, for the next maybe the next 2 years? And I want a sneaker prediction too.
Okay. I think it's already happening in the luxury space. Quiet luxury kind of kicked in last year, really with like there's like this it's specifically happening in America, which is now replicating the rest of the world, where the middle class is getting squeezed, and there's a lot more rich people, but there's a lot more poor people, and because of that, luxury is in a really interesting predicament because over during COVID, luxury was loud. It was big logos, and that's what luxury is or was. Today, luxury is brands like The Row for women, Laura Piana for men, and it's interesting because, and frankly, I mean, I live in LA and I'm in New York all the time because of things like crime and just people feeling uneasy. The people have shifted in what they wear and how they dress because they want to be understated so that it doesn't cause attention. I think that continues to be a trend. Like, I don't think we're going to fix the crime problem in America anytime soon. And I know America leads trends when it comes to things like fashion. So I think this understated luxury, which has been popular in Europe for a very, very long time, continues to be the focus in luxury. Um, I think fast fashion continues to become very, very important. People would make fun of Forever 21 20 years ago. Now everyone's wearing Shein for $5. So I think we just have to be realistic that there's like this bifurcation. There's people who spend money on luxury goods and everyone else will buy fast fashion. Between Temu and Shein, even what Kanye West dropped on Super Bowl Sunday, all of his clothes, every single item was $20. T-shirt, pant, shoe, whatever, $20. So I think the trend is going to be like very expensive or very cheap, and everything in the middle is kind of irrelevant. Like if you're going to go spend money, you're just going to go buy the nicest thing you can afford.
Yeah, I that makes sense.
And then I would say in sneakers, my one continued prediction is I think footwear becomes more and more functional. Like I think everyone's going to wear functional shoes for the lifestyle they live in. If you're an active person, like you should be, if you're a runner and you're active, you want to wear Hoka. If you're a climber, you're going to wear Merrell. If you're a yoga person, you may wear APL. If you're a basketball person, you wear this. And I think based on your work
More
lifestyle,
persona specific. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I like that. I like that a ton. Cool. Okay. Sick, man.
yeah.
W- um, well, yeah, thanks so much for coming. That was a solid convo. I'd like hearing, yeah, I'm stoked to see the growth of Ghost and
Thank
everything that
you.
you're doing. And yeah, man, thanks so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Hopefully, it was fruitful for everyone to listen.
It was solid. People are being quiet today. There's no questions, but I thought it was really solid. So thank you.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much.
All right, take care, D.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Good seeing you.